At my dad's retirement party, I worked all day setting up and running errands. When I asked about giving a speech, he laughed and said, "You're just here to help, not part of the celebration." The room laughed. I stayed quiet. What I did next changed everything. Now he's bombarding me with messages, begging me to fix it. Hey Reddit, I'm Marin, 34F, and for most of my life, I've been the one who smooths things over in my family. The helper. The calm one. The one who shows up early, stays late, and never asks for anything in return. And maybe that worked for a while. Maybe it even made me feel like I had some place in the family, even if it wasn't center stage. But something shifted recently, and now I'm sitting here staring at texts from my dad that I never thought I'd see. Not after what he said, not after what I did, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back a few months to when this all started. My dad, Colin, was preparing to retire from his career in civil engineering. 40 years with the same firm, a big portfolio of city infrastructure projects under his belt, and, if you ask him, a reputation that speaks for itself. He was planning his exit like it was a coronation. My mom, Helen, was buzzing with excitement. She kept saying, "It'll be so nice to finally have him home," though I don't think she fully understood what that would mean. My parents are the kind of couple who've settled into their roles like worn-out shoes. Dad leads, mom follows. She's lovely, really, but she's always been more focused on appearances than emotions. My siblings, Theo, 31M, and Isla, 29F, fit right into that mold. Theo is the golden boy, though we don't use that phrase in front of Dad. He followed in Dad's footsteps, literally. Same college, same field, even interned at the same firm. Dad glows when Theo talks, laughs like it's the best sound he's ever heard. Isla is the baby in every sense. Creative, spontaneous, always doing something new and exciting. She moves through life like a breeze, and everyone smiles when she enters the room. She's the family cheerleader. When she forgets things, she's free-spirited. When I forget something, it's unprofessional. And then there's me, the eldest. I work as a freelance event planner. Yes, a real job, that you wouldn't think so if you heard how my dad talks about it. Once, during a family dinner, he told someone, "Marin does party planning stuff. She's very organized." That's it. No mention of the awards I've won, the corporate clients I've worked with, or the fact that I literally built my business from scratch. So when my mom called and said, "Your dad would love it if you helped out with his retirement party," I already knew what that meant. Help, not plan, not manage. Just assist. Quietly. From the background. Still, I agreed. Not because I wanted praise, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't hope for some acknowledgement, but because it was my dad. Despite everything, I thought maybe this would be a chance to be seen. Maybe if I handled this party perfectly, he'd finally look at me the way he looks at Theo. Or at least thank me. I started planning everything from the ground up. My parents had booked a nice community center with a large hall and a garden space. It wasn't fancy, but it had potential. I took it from there, drafted a timeline, created a mood board, worked with a caterer I trust, ordered rentals for tables, linens, lighting. I coordinated parking with the venue, made personalized signs, arranged for a slideshow of Dad's career highlights. I even convinced one of my photographer friends to capture the night as a favor. The guest list was massive, over 120 people, including former coworkers, family friends, and a handful of Dad's old college buddies. I spent weeks emailing people, tracking down RSVPs, following up on plus ones, and juggling last-minute changes that my mom insisted were tiny, but actually disrupted the seating chart every time. Theo and Isla? They popped in occasionally. Theo helped put together a playlist, mostly classic rock and a few jazz instrumentals. Isla volunteered to make centerpieces and then forgot until the day before. I ended up assembling them myself after midnight, with my laptop playing soothing ocean sounds just to keep myself from getting too tense. The night before the party, I slept for maybe 3 hours. I was up before sunrise, loaded my car with supplies, and got to the venue by 7:30 a.m. The event wasn't scheduled to start until 5 p.m., but there was a lot to do. Unload boxes, check in with vendors, set up chairs and decorations, run to a local store for last-minute items my mom forgot to mention. I barely sat down. When my dad arrived around 4:30, fresh from a haircut and wearing a blazer that still had the price tag tucked into the sleeve, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd stop and say something. "Thanks, Marin," or "This looks great." Instead, he gave me a nod, glanced around, and said, "Looks like it's coming together." Then he walked off to talk to his old boss, leaving me holding a box of unused name cards. Fine. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for attention. I was doing it because I cared. Right? Guests started to arrive. Laughter filled the hall. The tables glowed under soft amber lights. People greeted my dad like he was some kind of legend. Which, in their eyes, I guess he was. I moved around the room quietly, checking in with the caterers, making sure the slideshow was running, offering help wherever it was needed. I even changed into a dress and touched up my makeup in the bathroom, hoping I'd feel more like a guest and less like a staff member. Then the speeches started. The speeches began just after sunset, once everyone had settled into their seats and finished dinner. The lights dimmed slightly, casting a warm glow across the room. A hush fell over the crowd as my mom stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she began, smiling that perfect, practiced smile she always wore when entertaining guests. "This night means so much to Colin and to our family. 40 years of hard work, leadership, and dedication. He's built more than buildings, he's built a legacy." Polite applause followed. I stood at the back near the dessert table, arms folded loosely in front of me. My feet ached, but I stayed still. She handed the microphone to Theo, who got up with an easy confidence, as if this entire evening had been built around him. And in a way, it had. He started by thanking Dad for being his role model, his mentor, his inspiration to pursue greatness. He told a long story about building a treehouse with Dad when he was 8 and somehow turned it into a metaphor about architecture and family structure. It was polished, rehearsed. He even made people laugh. But every word was a mirror held up to my dad, showing him exactly the son he wanted to see. When Theo finished, Dad stood and clapped before pulling him into a hug. Then came Isla. Sweet, impulsive Isla, who walked up barefoot because her heels hurt and started her speech by saying, "I didn't really write anything down," followed by 10 minutes of rambling about memories from family vacations, inside jokes with Dad, and how he's always been the solid one in the chaos. She cried near the end. Dad wiped her tears with a napkin and kissed the top of her head. More applause. A few people even dabbed at their eyes. I waited a moment, then made my way toward my dad. I didn't need a long speech, just a few words. A chance to thank him, to acknowledge the night, to be part of it. He was standing near the head table, still smiling from Isla's speech, when I approached. "Hey," I said gently, keeping my voice low so others wouldn't hear. "Would it be okay if I said a few words?" He looked at me, blinking once. Then, without hesitation, he laughed. Not a mean-spirited cackle, worse, actually. It was the kind of laugh you give someone when they say something ridiculous. He looked around, as if expecting others to laugh with him. "Oh, Marin," he said, shaking his head. "You've done enough already. You're just here to help, remember?" A few people nearby chuckled, just enough to make my stomach twist. Someone whispered, "She's always so serious," and another voice added, "She just wants to make it about herself." My smile froze in place. I felt the burn behind my eyes, but I refused to blink. Instead, I nodded once. "Of course," I said softly. "Whatever you think." And I walked away. Back to the dessert table. Back to the shadows. I stayed quiet through the rest of the speeches. Watch as my dad took photos with Theo and Isla, raising his glass for each pose, arms around their shoulders. I wasn't asked to join a single picture. No one thanked me. No one noticed I had gone silent. The rest of the night blurred by in a haze of laughter and music. I cleared empty plates, tidied up stray decorations, and made sure the vendors were packing up on schedule. I even drove Isla home when her feet hurt too much to walk back to the car. She fell asleep in the passenger seat. By the time I got back to my apartment, the clock read just past midnight. My phone buzzed once. A text from my dad. "Thanks again for helping today. Party went well." That was it. No mention of the effort. No acknowledgement of the work. Just a polite nod. Like I'd set up folding chairs for a PTA meeting. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. I wasn't looking to get even, not at first. I just wanted to document everything. My receipts. My timelines. My emails. I wanted something to look at and remind myself I wasn't crazy for feeling invisible. But somewhere in the middle of scrolling through photos of the party, something clicked. A slow, steady realization. They never saw me. Not once. And I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I built with my own hands. After that night, I didn't respond to my dad's message. I needed space to think. Not out of anger, at least not at first, but out of something deeper. Something that felt like grief. Grief for the version of myself that kept showing up, that kept hoping, I spent the next day doing nothing. I left my laptop closed, let my phone stay silent, and simply sat with the stillness. The party was over. Everyone had gone home, posted their pictures, said their goodbyes. My parents probably went to bed thinking it had all gone perfectly. And to be fair, on the surface, it had. But underneath the decorations and speeches and staged smiles, something had quietly shifted. Not for them, for me. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. The first step was subtle. I logged into the shared folder I'd created for the event, where I had stored all the planning documents, invoices, and photos, and removed their access. Not out of spite, but because I owned the account. I had paid for the upgraded storage. I had created every file. They hadn't touched it. Not once. Then I sat down and carefully drafted a letter. Not an email. A real letter. Printed on smooth, ivory stationery I'd been saving for client thank yous. I addressed it to Colin and Helen, my parents, and signed it with my full name at the bottom. Not your daughter. Not Marin. Just Marini Winslow, event director. Inside the envelope, I included a detailed invoice. Not inflated, just honest. It listed every hour I worked, every cost I had covered out of pocket, every vendor I'd coordinated, down to the florist Isla forgot to call. I even included the cost of mileage for driving across the city multiple times for items Mom insisted couldn't be shipped. The total came out to just over $4,200. It wasn't about the money. It was about value. On the envelope, I wrote in clean, even letters, professional invoice, services rendered. And I mailed it. I didn't warn them. I didn't text or call. I just let it arrive. 3 days later, my phone started buzzing. First, a missed call from my mom. Then a message from my dad. What is this about? This has to be a mistake. I didn't respond. Later that evening, another message. You're being unreasonable. We're family. Family helps each other. I didn't reply to that one either. The next morning, I received an email, long, rambling, and clearly typed by my mom, about how the party was a gift for your father's legacy and how we never imagined you would treat us like clients. She said I was turning a joyful night into something ugly. I read it twice. Then I archived it. I didn't stop there. A week later, I published a blog post on my professional website. I kept it anonymous, using only initials and vague references. The title was simple: The Invisible Planner, When Family Expects Free Labor. It detailed the emotional weight of being the behind-the-scenes worker in your own family, how people assume your time and skills are just available. The post gained traction. Other planners, stylists, designers, they shared it. It spread across a few industry Facebook groups. I started getting messages from people who had gone through the same thing. Siblings asking for free photo shoots. Parents demanding wedding favors. Friends who expected floral arrangements for cost or less. My story wasn't rare. And that was the point. About 2 weeks after the party, I got another call. This time I picked up. Marin, my dad said. His voice was tired. Yes, I said, flat. He hesitated. Can we just talk? Face to face? Your mother and I feel like there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said calmly. Just a long overdue correction. There was silence. Then, you've made your point. But don't you think this is a bit much? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that had always been the phrase they used whenever I tried to set a boundary. Too sensitive, too serious, too much. I didn't answer. I just let the silence hang. Eventually, he added, you don't have to be like this. No, I said. I don't. And I won't be anymore. I hung up. That weekend, Theo called. He left a voicemail saying something about family unity and how I shouldn't let a single night ruin things. He offered to mediate if I needed someone rational to step in. I deleted it. Then Isla texted. Her message was shorter, but it still carried the same patronizing tone. Hey, not sure what's going on, but you're scaring Mom. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I wasn't trying to scare anyone, but they needed to feel it. The quiet, the distance, the cost. And still, I wasn't done. Because there was one final step. One that would make sure they didn't sweep this under the rug, pretend it never happened. I had one last thing to reveal, something they'd never expect. The final step came the following Monday. I sat at my desk, opened the folder I'd labeled Project Legacy, and stared at the neatly organized documents inside: contracts, receipts, planning notes, timelines, and the finalized vendor list. I had even kept the color palettes and seating charts in case they ever needed to reference them, though I knew by now they never would. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening a blank document. It was time to write the final case study. You see, 2 months before the retirement party, I had been planning a soft launch for my full-time event planning business. It was something I'd been dreaming about but never had the time or courage to fully pursue. For years, I did events on the side, charity luncheons, small weddings, community dinners. Always as favors. Always for less than I was worth. I had built a quiet but strong portfolio. Still, I hesitated. I think, deep down, I had internalized the way my family saw me. Helpful, reliable, background support. The one who made things run smoothly without asking for anything in return. But that night, at the party, standing there while the room laughed, and my father said I wasn't part of the celebration, it jolted something loose in me. Something final. I had done all that work, carried all that weight, and been invisible. Worse, my effort had been dismissed as a given. Expected. A background task like refilling napkins or fixing a folding chair. So I stopped waiting for their approval and started moving like someone who didn't need it. The case study was clean, polished, and professional. I wrote it like a third-party observer would. Objective, precise, but with just enough personality to show my process. I described how I handled vendor coordination, design execution, budget tracking, and conflict management without naming names. I even detailed the logistical challenges I overcame during setup, like having to reconfigure the table layout when the chairs they ordered were the wrong height and a rental company backed out 2 days before the event. Then I drafted a short piece for my website's blog. I titled it, The Invisible Planner, When Family Expects Free Labor. I didn't include identifying details. I didn't need to. The story, unfortunately, was far too relatable. I spoke about how emotional labor and professional expertise are often undervalued when you're helping family. How boundaries blur, expectations grow, and appreciation fades until you're no longer seen as a skilled professional, just a pair of hands. It wasn't bitter. It was reflective. I published it on a Thursday. By Saturday, it had been picked up and shared by 3 event planning networks and dozens of freelancers on social media. My inbox filled up with messages from other professionals, photographers, designers, bakers, coordinators, thanking me for saying what they hadn't found the words for. One woman told me she was still waiting to be paid for the wedding she planned for her own sister. By Monday, I had 3 new client inquiries. By Friday, I had 9. And by the end of the month, I had officially transitioned from part-time planner to full-time business owner. 3 weeks after the party, I received a certified envelope in the mail. It was a check. No note. No apology. No acknowledgement of what it meant. Just the full amount from the invoice I had sent, down to the penny. I stared at it for a while before placing it in my business folder. It was a transaction. Nothing more. But that's what they wanted, right? A task completed. A service rendered. I had provided exactly that. I had been professional, detailed, and courteous, even when they hadn't been. I deposited the check and didn't reply. The messages started trickling in after that. First from my dad. I hope we can move past this. It was never meant to be hurtful. Then my mom. You're taking this too far. We're family. You made your father feel like he did something wrong on a night that was supposed to be joyful. Then Theo chimed in. If you want help smoothing things over, let me know. No hard feelings on my end. That made me pause. No hard feelings on your end? He had watched it happen. Watched the way I'd been treated. And not once had he stepped in. Not to defend me. Not even to acknowledge it. It was easier for him to stay neutral than to admit that something had been unfair. Isla was the only one who genuinely reached out. She sent a long, thoughtful message that acknowledged how much I had done. She said she was sorry for how they had treated me. She said she didn't know how to make it right, but that she wanted to understand. I thanked her, but I didn't offer anything more. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. In the 8 months that followed, everything changed, but not in the loud, dramatic way you might expect. It was gradual, quiet, the kind of transformation that doesn't announce itself, but becomes undeniable once it's complete. My business, which had once felt like a hopeful side project, grew faster than I ever imagined. Word spread. One client led to another, and then another. People remembered how I made them feel taken care of, how I handled problems before they became problems. A florist I worked with on a charity gala referred me to her cousin's engagement party. That party turned into a destination wedding. From there, it was like dominoes. I hired my first assistant, Ray, a month in. She started part-time, mostly helping with logistics and communication. But as the requests kept coming, she quickly became full-time, and now I genuinely don't know how I ever managed without her. We built a rhythm, a system, a shared language that made even the most chaotic events run smoothly. I trusted her completely, and for the first time, I felt what it was like to work with someone who truly respected my boundaries, my time, and my process. I upgraded my website. I raised my rates. I stopped explaining or justifying my prices to anyone. When a potential client asked for a discount or tried to barter with exposure, I politely declined. I didn't feel guilty anymore. I no longer felt like I needed to overcompensate or make myself small to be hired. 3 cities, 9 large-scale events. For speaking engagements. A guest spot on a podcast about women-led creative businesses. I remember walking into a room of strangers who had all read my blog post and heard me speak. They weren't interested in my family name or who I'd worked for in the past. They wanted to know how I built something of my own from the ground up after being overlooked for so long. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized I had stopped thinking about what my family might say. I no longer measured my success against their opinions. That pressure, the one I had carried for years, to be helpful, to stay useful, to avoid rocking the boat, lifted without me noticing. I breathed deeper. I stood taller. Meanwhile, my family and I drifted, not with a blowout or an official falling out, but with silence. I didn't go back to the house. No one called to invite me over. I saw the photos online. Dad grinning at some small backyard barbecue, Mom rearranging plates on a folding table, Theo with his usual fixed smile. Same poses, same dynamics. But this time, I wasn't in the background, holding up the corners. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel rejected. I felt peaceful. I think they expected I'd fold eventually. That after a few weeks of quiet, I'd show up for the next family holiday, carrying a tray of appetizers, setting the table, answering questions about what I've been up to while they barely listened. That I would slip back into the old role, the helper, the assistant, the reliable one who never asked for space or credit. But I didn't. And they didn't know what to do with that. Because for the first time, I had taken the energy I used to pour into proving myself to them and invested it into myself. That's when I realized something it had taken me 37 years to fully understand. If you let people define you only by what you do for them, they will never learn to value who you actually are. They won't see the ideas, the ambition, the strength behind your help. They'll just expect it. And when you stop giving it so freely, they'll say you've changed, when really, you've just started protecting your worth. I wasn't just there to help. I wasn't the background crew to someone else's story. I had my own story, and I was finally living it. And I was never going back. That's where things stand now. The business is thriving. My days are full of creativity, autonomy, and mutual respect. I work with clients who see me, not just what I can do for them. I wake up excited to plan, to design, to build experiences that matter. And I go to sleep knowing I created something that belongs entirely to me. No more walking on eggshells. No more waiting to be acknowledged. No more making myself small so others can stay comfortable. My family still doesn't quite understand what changed. But I do. And that's enough.